Okay.
That's something
Good
to read.
evening. It's just a little past 7 o'clock. I'd like to call the meeting of the Urbana City Council to order. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Barnes?
Here.
Mr. Bowersox?
Here.
Ms. Chenoweth?
Present by telephone.
Mr. Lewis?
Here.
Mr. Roberts? Mr. Smythe?
Here.
Ms. Stevenson?
Present.
Mayor Pressing?
Here. And since it's after a holiday, it's our custom to begin the meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. So would you all please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? Next on the agenda is approval of minutes of the previous meeting, which would be June 4th, 2007.
So moved.
Motion by Ms. Stevenson, seconded by Mr. Smythe. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes? Okay. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The minutes are approved. Next, are there any additions to the agenda? Seeing none, we'll move on. Petitions and communications. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to address the City Council? Would you please come forward and state your name and address, and keep your remarks to 5 minutes? Unless you get a special dispensation from the City Council.
Scott Dossett, 501 East High Street, right over there. Wanted to come and I know you guys have got a real busy agenda today, but to kind of try to keep the fire going underneath the kettle of the Neighborhood Conservation District ordinance that I know you guys just got for review. And I don't expect there's perhaps a lot of time that you've had to look at the particulars, but I want to really thank the Plan Commission and the Historic Preservation Commission for the work they've done on this to date. I think we're really coming up with something that could be a valuable tool in the kit of the citizen as they try to make Urbana a better place to live. There's been some dynamic tension about the role of the Historic Preservation and the Plan Commission in this, and to me it's a pretty clear demarcation between historic properties and areas and literally neighborhood survival, and I hope you think about that as you read through this ordinance. Our interests in the Historic East Urbana Neighborhood Association has much more to do with the way large segments of blocks are infilled in totally inappropriate construction manner that make our community just something that kind of looks like a warehouse community instead of single-family homes, which is our predominant design. Housing investment corporations is something that's come up in this debate, and I think that's something that's probably worth further study and consideration by some neighborhood organizations and groups, but that's a pretty tough sell in Huna, where our income base is pretty low. We're a census target track area for special service already. And so I think that that's something that you can incorporate in as you move on down the road here. But I guess my main message, maybe one of a couple, is that I really believe that government has a legitimate regulatory responsibility to craft good infill, quality, and construction design ordinances. I don't want to say street sign too often in this group because I know what kind of a, well, I don't know, but I've heard what kind of problems we have with street signs in Urbana. And I hope we're not taking on another one of those, but I do not see why it's out of the ordinary or un-American to try to get new buildings and infill construction, particularly after demolitions, to look like the rest of our neighborhood does. So I'm asking you to continue to work to improve, have further review on the Neighborhood Conservation District ordinance, and essentially not to kill it tonight. In our work with community development, which has been taking place over the last 4 or 5 months, I think we've got this ordinance in a place where, you know, to me as a rookie, It's got a reasonable compliance percentage. It has the elements of design review. It's been taken out of the Historic Preservation Ordinance, but still allows review by the Historic Preservation Commission, and so I think that's, I think we're really getting somewhere with this, and in addition to the Planning Commission and HPC, of course, staff deserves a lot of accolade for their patience with us, because we come to them as citizens with all kinds of ideas, and then, you know, Robert and Libby kind of get to filter this stuff out into what is reality and hopefully a good ordinance. So I guess in closing, I hope we can move forward with the neighborhood conservation districts, continue to move forward with the downzoning efforts that we're working on with community development now, continue nuisance enforcement, and really work with Public Works on getting derelict properties and vehicles and stuff like that cleaned up. And in addition, try to think a little bit more in the future, and my note here is more for East Urbana. I still see no reason why the mixed office residential kind of zoning paradigm, if you would, couldn't be used as we try to think creatively and proactively in an approach to development, particularly at the intersections of East Main and Vine Street. And so thank you very much for your time, and have a good meeting.
Thank you, Scott. Does anyone have a question for Scott? Well, thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to address the council? Okay, we'll move on. I don't believe...
Mayor?
Okay, did you want to say
Could
something?
I make
Sure.
an announcement? I just wanted to invite the people of Urbana to the upcoming annual Historic East Urbana Neighborhood Association picnic, which will be taking place at Victory Park, our neighborhood park, this coming weekend, the 23rd. It'll be starting around noon and going till about 6-ish. And I was going to bring the flyer, but I had already passed them all out last night, and I forgot to keep one for myself to bring before you. There will be food, and some of the food has been donated by local businesses. We'll be grilling. We'll have live music. We have a brand new play area that's been constructed by citizen participation, a new playground that your children would really enjoy. And even if you don't live specifically in the confines of the historic East Urbana neighborhood, we would invite you to come and stop by and enjoy.
Thank you, Dennis. Okay, I don't believe we have any old business, so we'll move on to reports of standing committees. That's Charlie Smythe.
Yes, from last week's Committee of the Whole, we have item number 1, Resolution 2007-06-012R, resolution ascertaining prevailing wages for the fiscal year 2007-2008. For the committee, I so move.
Motion by Mr. Smythe, seconded by Mr. Lewis. Is there any discussion? If not, would the clerk, the clerk does not have to call the roll on this one. It's a resolution, correct? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The motion carries. Mr. Smythe.
Next item is ordinance number 2007-06-052, an ordinance revising the annual budget ordinance from transferring some funds from the General Reserve Fund. This is the 2007 budget that we're currently operating under. For the committee, I so move.
I would second that.
Motion by Mr. Smythe, seconded by Mr. Roberts. Is there any discussion? If not, would the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Barnes?
Yes.
Mr. Bowersox?
Yes.
Ms. Shenoweth?
Yes.
Mr. Lewis?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Smythe?
Yes.
Ms. Stevenson?
Yes.
Okay, that motion carries. Mr. Smythe.
Next up, we have 2 liquor license amendments. The first is ordinance number 2007-05042, an ordinance establishing a Class CA caterers retail liquor license. For the committee, I so move.
I second that motion.
Motion by Mr. Smythe, seconded by Mr. Roberts. Is there any discussion? If not, would the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Barnes?
Yes.
Mr. Bowersox?
Yes.
Ms. Shenoweth?
Yes.
Mr. Lewis?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Smythe?
Yes.
Ms. Stevenson?
Yes.
That motion carries. Mr. Smythe.
Part 2 of this is ordinance number 2007-05-043, an ordinance establishing a university-related organization liquor license. For the committee, I so move.
And I second that motion.
Motion by Mr. Smythe, seconded by Mr. Roberts. Any discussion on this one? Okay, would the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Barnes?
Yes.
Mr. Bowersox?
Yes.
Ms. Chenoweth?
Yes.
Mr. Lewis?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Smythe?
Yes.
Ms. Stevenson?
Yes.
That motion carries. Mr. Smythe.
Okay, next up is ordinance number 2007-06-053, an ordinance further amending Chapter 3 Alcoholic Liquors of the Code of Ordinances of the City of Urbana, granting the Liquor Commission authority to revoke liquor licenses due to riotous or uncontrolled civil unrest. For the committee, I so move.
Second.
I think our city attorney has a comment on this one. You probably don't like that word revoke, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
That's exactly, I was
Okay.
wondering if it could be possible to amend that to suspend.
The actual ordinance says suspend.
Yes, ma'am.
And the title in the agenda is incorrect. So would you be willing to amend your motion?
Amend my motion to use the word suspend liquor licenses.
Now, is that okay with you, Mr. Roberts?
I'll second.
What was, it was,
Oh, Mr. Lewis, I'm sorry.
my pal.
Mr. Lewis. Is that okay? Okay, it's okay with both of them. Then the motion as amended, is there any further discussion on the ordinance itself? Okay, would the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Barnes?
Yes.
Mr. Bowersox?
Yes.
Ms. Chenoweth?
Yes.
Mr. Lewis?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Smythe?
Yes.
Ms. Stevenson?
Yes.
That motion carries. Mr. Smythe.
Okay. Next up is a motion to approve social service funding allocations as corrected last week. For the committee, I so move.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Smythe, seconded by Mr. Lewis. Would you like to comment on it, Kelly? Do you have anything further to add?
No, I was just here in case there were any
Okay.
questions.
Are there any questions?
Just a quick question. Charlie, your motion includes the changes that Brandon made and that Kelly made to the new spreadsheet, correct?
That's correct, yes.
Okay.
The version as we were sent to it via email.
Okay.
Did you have something else
I've
to
got a
add?
comment.
Okay, Dennis Roberts.
Every year, we allocate certain funds for local agencies that provide services for the city, and, well, not so much to the city, but to the citizens of our city. And every year, we have a large number of people and organizations who come forward to request the funds. And we have a hard time making decisions about specifically how to allocate our funds. And we have 7 council members here, and sometimes have, it's sometimes uncanny how similarly they agree upon the funding of certain projects. And then you'll find sometimes that there'll be a divergence of opinion. And of course, the process that we go through is very democratic. Everybody allocates their funds out, and then it's all compiled, and the average is taken. And we try to fund each organization according to, as close as we can, to the average vote of the 7 council members. And we have a chance to interact and question funding allocations. And so we have done all that, and it's a very good process. And what I noticed in this year's process was that there were 4 programs that received funding for the first time. And I think that's always a real positive thing, because it allows different kinds of groups to enter the funding stream offered by the city and supply support for projects that are worthy. And this year we actually had 4 brand new projects being funded. And these are Mentoring Young Sisters through the Champaign-Urbana Area Project, and also a self-defense classes for adults with developmental disabilities through the Champaign-Urbana Special Recreation Department. Summer camp positions for children through the Urbana Park District, and Mentor Ball program through the Urbana Public School District 116. And also, some of the projects that were offered this time received considerable significant increases. There's always an attempt to keep a fair median growth or support a project consistently over a long period of time if the project seems to be worthy and meeting its goals efficiently. At this time, we actually increased the funding for certain projects somewhat significantly, sometimes almost 100% more. And these were the Conservatory of Central Illinois, offering Urbana tuition-free programs, and this is music. These are music programs. The Champaign County Christian Health Center received funding for health care without barriers, a very important program. And the PACE Meal Program, Senior Nutrition Program, for home-delivered meals for seniors received higher funding. And the Salvation Army Stepping Stone Center received a greater portion of funding. So I think that these are reasonable changes, and I think that the City Council could be very pleased and proud that we're offering this assistance to our local citizens through these agencies. And I just thought I would enunciate these and make them, share them with the public, because the public really hasn't probably heard too much discussion about this particular funding program. So thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Dennis. Anybody else have a comment on the social service funding? If not, would the clerk please call the roll? It's just a motion? Okay.
It's a motion to include it in the budget.
Turn the page already. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed? Okay, there's one no. The motion carries. We don't have any reports of special committees, I don't believe. Reports of officers. I would like to say that I've received a couple of communications. SUNA, Southeast Urbana Neighborhood Association, had a meeting last week, and people were concerned about, people who lived on Scoville were very concerned about increased traffic due to the Meyer project. But I have a letter from Dan and Marge Perino, and they are complimenting our staff. They liked Libby Tyler's presentation, and then they talked with Public Works staff afterwards, and they were very pleased with the way the staff dealt with the public. They said each was cordial, kind, and understanding, and we want them to know this. And he asked me to pass it on. So I want to thank the Public Works staff.
Yeah.
And Libby Tyler. Then we have a communication from a lady who lives near the Carl expansion, Jean Burns, and she's concerned about the future there. Carl is having a meeting on Thursday, the 21st. So I hope that council members can go, and I think that we also should have a study session on this, because the neighborhood has certain things that they would like to see. And Carl has obviously a great need to do some expansion, so I think we ought to be able to have everybody get together and work out the best possible plan. So I hope you can come on the 21st. I'm going to be out of town, but I would urge council members to attend, and anyone in the public who's interested. Does anyone else have a report? Okay, we'll move on. First is a presentation by our fire department on Urbana's Risk Watch program. This is our Fire Chief Rex Munt.
Regretfully, Mayor, we received information this morning that our key person, Patty Messler, who is the director of Champaign County Risk Watch, was unable to make it tonight. And so, if I may ask the patience of the council, we'd like to come back in a few weeks when she's available, because she gave us an offer to do it without her, and I will not do that. She's too important to the success, so I regret that, but thank you very much.
Okay, we'll schedule it for another time. Thank you. All right, we'll move on to ordinance number 2007-06-056, an ordinance approving and authorizing the execution of an agreement for promotion and marketing services. This is the Urbana Business Association. And we have Tom Carino, our Director of Economic Development, to discuss this.
I just wanted to mention that this is the same as what you saw last week. And if you have any questions about this, I'd be happy to try to answer them.
Move approval.
Okay, motion by Mr. Smythe, seconded by Ms. Stevenson. Is there any discussion?
I just want to comment on what a good job the Urbana Business Association does, and that a lot of our events in the city wouldn't be as successful without them. So I think it's imperative that we pass this.
Okay. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Barnes?
Yes.
Mr. Bowersox?
Yes.
Ms. Shenoweth?
Yes.
Mr. Lewis?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Smythe? Ms. Stevenson?
Yes.
That motion carries. Ordinance number 2007-06-060, an ordinance authorizing the mayor to execute an intergovernmental agreement for it's a justice assistance grant, and that's for fiscal 2007-8. And I think we have our police chief, Mike Beely, to explain this.
This is a grant that is, Champaign is the lead agency for. We've gotten this grant for the past 2 years. The grant is divided up based on a formula that includes population. Our cut of that this year is $17,952. This ordinance authorizes the mayor to enter into that intergovernmental agreement to receive those funds.
Move approval.
Second.
Okay, motion by Mr. Smythe, second by Mr. Lewis. Is there any discussion?
I have a question.
Yes.
It says that we'll buy things that are approved under the JAG grant. Can you give us any kind of sense of what would be purchased with the $17,000? And my second question is, why is it that Champaign gets $70,000 and we get $17,000? Is that really based on population?
As to your first question, the recommendation this year for the funds includes mobile field force protective gear, 25 sets of it, which includes upper body protectors, forearm, shin guards, gloves, storage bags, and training for all of our officers in mobile field force. As to your second question, the formula has to do in part with population. I think it also has to do with Part 1 crimes and a number of things, but the actual cut, the splits, are based on the formula that comes with the grant for each city and the county.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Would the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Barnes?
Yes.
Mr. Bowersox?
Yes.
Ms. Shenoweth?
Yes.
Mr. Lewis?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Smythe?
Yes.
Ms. Stevenson?
Yes.
That motion carries. Next, we have ordinance number 2007-06-058, an ordinance amending the zoning map of the city of Urbana, and this is to rezone a portion of 1907 North Cunningham Avenue from B3 General Business to R4 Medium Density Multiple Family. And we have Robert Myers to explain this.
Hello, everyone. Again, this Eastland Suites Hotel and Conference Center, they have about 11.5 acres of property at 1907 North Cunningham. This is just south of I-74. Their property is split between commercial and residential, and they want to rebuild the residential portion. Those are the apartment buildings. They plan to build 4 new apartment buildings, each with 28 units. In order to do that the way that they need to, they're applying to rezone 0.19 acre portion of their property from B3 commercial to residential in order to achieve that. And if in terms of the zoning criteria, that's all covered in your staff report. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Dennis Roberts.
I guess I don't have a specific question about the zoning change because I can see its use and importance on this property. With the request came a schematic showing the proposed new use for the property, and that's not really part of the zoning change. But I guess my question is, has the new use been discussed in planning, and have the property owners that are directly west of the property been notified of the new plans?
Yes, we've discussed the project at our weekly coordination meetings with both planning and public works. Also, we've sent out notice to all adjoining property owners, including the people in the county and unincorporated areas along Willow Road, all the property owners along Willow Road that abut this property.
Has there been a public hearing on that yet, or is that to come?
There has been a public hearing of the Planning Commission, and in fact, there was one person there who lives on Willow Road right behind this, and her question had to do with, is this going to annex me into the city of Urbana? And the answer was no. This doesn't have anything to do with annexation or bringing new properties into the city. Otherwise, she said she was okay with it.
Thank you, Robert.
Oh, Brandon, were you next?
Me too, yeah.
Okay, let's have the motion first, and then we'll have the
I would
discussion.
move approval.
Motion by Ms. Stevenson, seconded by Ms. Barnes. Brandon, you had a question.
Yeah, my quick question, Robert, is there any screening along the west side? I know the buildings are pretty close, and I know the zoning actually doesn't change how close these buildings would be to the homes, but is there a fence or landscaping or anything planned? Because there are a couple homes that are really close.
Right. I recall in their site plan they're showing a fence. Even if that's not the case, the zoning ordinance requires some buffering if it joins residential, whether residential in the city or the county. Yeah.
Thanks.
If there are no other questions, would the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Barnes?
Yes.
Mr. Bowersox?
Yes.
Ms. Shenoweth?
Yes.
Mr. Lewis?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Smythe?
Yes.
Ms. Stevenson?
Yes.
That motion carries. Next, we have ordinance number 2007-06-059, an ordinance approving a text amendment to the zoning ordinance of the City of Urbana, Illinois, adding Section 13.5, Neighborhood Conservation Districts, to the Urbana zoning ordinance. Is there a motion?
Yeah, I make a motion that it be accepted.
Motion by Dennis Roberts. Is there a second? Second by Charlie Smythe, and Robert Myers is here to answer any questions you might have. Are there any questions? Don't seem to be any questions. Or did you want to say something?
I was hoping we would take the time to digest this. It's fairly big, and I was going to suggest that we actually take it up in committee next week, unless people are really comfortable with it. I mean, if people are ready to go with it, otherwise I think it'd be more appropriate, given the extent and the amount of work that has gone into this, that it'd be more appropriate to talk about it at committee. I don't know how you feel, Dennis. You made a motion.
Yes, I did. Actually, I think that has merit. And so maybe I withdraw my motion.
Okay.
I'd accept that.
Who was the second?
I was the second.
But you were the second?
Yeah.
Oh. Is there another motion then?
I'd move to send this to committee for discussion next week.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Smythe, seconded by Ms. Stevenson to send this to committee for next week. All those in favor, please.
Mayor?
Yes.
Excuse me.
Ms. Chenoweth.
Sorry, it's hard for me to raise my hand virtually. I look forward to coming back to council chamber.
You'll have to speak up.
One thing, I'm a little surprised that we had such little public input during today's meeting on this. I know there's been quite a bit of public input, and I've been sorting through it. And so my question is, was it posted to the neighborhood listservs, including SUNA and other neighborhoods, not necessarily just UNA and WUNA, that we would be taking a vote today? And if either way, is it possible that we could notify those listservs that we're going to discuss this in committee next week?
Mr. Smythe.
Danielle, it was, my understanding that we were going to send this to committee in informal discussions I had. So I've made no real effort to publicize it, but I will make sure that it gets out on the WUNA list and to UCAN as well.
Okay, and perhaps Dennis and Lynn can take care of Suna and Juna?
Right.
I would,
They're nodding
yes.
their heads, yes.
Great. Thanks. That takes care of my concerns.
Okay, all those in favor, oh, you have something else? you want to say?
I have a suggestion, too. It would be interesting to have a member from the Planning Commission come to perhaps give a presentation, too, about their viewpoint. They've had a long series of discussions about this project. I believe it left them and has evolved yet one more time before it's arrived at our doorstep. And perhaps because of its lengthy history of evolution, it might be useful to have them on hand for questions.
Just to clarify, did you want them to make a presentation or to be here for questions?
Maybe as a summary of their actions, and as it came to us without really strong support from planning, they may be able to explain how that lack of recommendation has affected their thinking, and might affect ours.
All right, all those in favor of the motion to send this to committee, please signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Those opposed? The motion carries. Now we're up to ordinance number 2007-06-057, an ordinance approving the annual budget. Did you want to come up, Ron? Is there a motion?
I make a motion to accept ordinance number 2007-06-057, approving the annual budget for the fiscal year 2007-8.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Roberts, seconded by Mr. Lewis. Is there any discussion, or does anyone have a question for?
Does that include the 9 amendments that are listed here?
Yes, that includes the amendments that were sent out.
I have just a comment, Mayor, if I could.
Sure. Ms. Chenoweth.
I have the UPTV, the Urbana Public Television Commission, and the Cable Commission have been pretty busy with the refranchising process. I think I've had at least 3 meetings since I got here on that, and so I do have some concerns or possible suggestions about UPTV, especially the public access component and its funding, but because my focus has been split, it's been difficult to do that. It's a very small portion of the budget, so I'm comfortable moving forward, but I just wanted to let council members know that I might be bringing a budget amendment after, good conversation with staff where we kind of shake it out in face-to-face back to the council concerning public access. So I just wanted to give people a heads up.
Okay, thank you. Lynn Barnes.
Just a quick question. Just to reiterate, in terms of any Philo road improvements, which I believe we're talking about, I think maybe next week, anything that we decided to do would have to be added as a budget amendment for this, correct?
Yes, the big Philo road project.
Yeah, there's a small amount in here.
The big project, there's no, that.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Anyone else?
Yeah,
Brandon.
I had a really quick question, and Mayor, maybe you're the best person to answer it. I guess a few of you got a communication that I didn't receive yet, even though I'd been on email and read my mail today, about someone writing to the council members saying they were concerned about the 2 reclassifications that were part of the budget amendment. And I was just wondering if you could briefly say, I assume we don't just, individually handpick people and reclassify them, that we look at everybody's job duties and their job descriptions and their categories, and we do this fairly so that all the hundreds of employees we have get a fair shake to be paid in return for the job they do for the city. So I didn't get the correspondence, but if maybe you could briefly describe it, just so I'm aware of it before we take the vote.
Well, there was an individual who didn't like the reclassification of another individual. So I could just tell you that the process that we used is if the department head requests a reclassification, then our personnel department looks into it in terms of what are the duties of the job, and then compare it with other comparable cities. And that's what we did in these instances. And what we're planning to do is review all the secretarial positions in the entire city, but we can't do them all at once. So we're doing it based on a, if the department head would like to do it, we'll certainly consider that, but we are going to go through all of them. And we're even going to consider whether the position should be renamed. I think there's a trend to call people administrative assistant. So that's an ongoing project.
Okay, thanks. I think that sounds really fair, and I support this.
Charlie.
Mayor, in follow-up, we have several of these every year, don't we? I mean, it seems like there's like one or two of these sorts of reclassifications that I've seen over the years.
I don't know if we had any last year. I don't recall any, but we do have these two for next year. And as I said, we will be systematically looking at secretaries first, and then we're going to go through the entire staff eventually. But we don't have the money set aside to do a huge comprehensive study all at once.
Okay.
Charlie.
Okay. Sort of a general comment on the budget. I realize it's a fairly flat budget. It tweaks a few things, adds a little bit of significant money in several places. But it really doesn't introduce any really new programs or anything like that at this point. We're not adding police officers like we did in past years, but we are, adding half FTE here, half FTE there, and helping out individual departments. One thing that Heather said last week really struck me, and I think it's an important one, and one that we should keep in mind in the years to come. And that's the importance of maintaining a reserve fund. And I think she was very right in saying that we need to start thinking about that long term. And so as I know we have a number of significant development projects that we want to get underway. And a lot of our reserve fund got taken up in a catastrophic, unforeseen way with the landfill remediation, which is what those things are for. But we should. And I would agree with Heather that we should start thinking about how to go about systematically replenishing that fund in the years to come, should funds become available. But otherwise, I think the budget itself is a very healthy one, and one that I can support. Thank you.
Ron, did you want to comment on the systematic building up of the reserve fund?
Well, I agree with that. There are probably about 10 areas that might call future liabilities or areas of concern that I think the city is going to have to begin to talk about and discuss a little bit, and that's one of them. There are others too. All of these will not come to fruition in the next 1 or 2 years, but they're liabilities that are building up. Sometime in the future, we're going to have to address them. And so in that regard, as well as, we're coming off about 3 years of really strong general fund revenues due to new developments. The Walmart store, the O'Brien's, the increase in the 0.25% sales tax on our home rule, and other developments. So we've had a real strong revenue growth in the general fund for the last 3 years. But the impact of those are beginning to be phased out. And so if you look at our revenues and you separate out the impact of those new programs, those new developments, you see that our revenue do not stay up with inflation. Historically, they do not meet the cost of the expenses. And if we don't periodically, once every couple of years, come up with a big development project, then we end up in a process where we either have to identify some type of tax increase or rate increase or cuts in services somewhere. So, and I'm a little afraid that we're kind of beginning to enter that stagnant period. And so I want to begin a process of trying to present all the information to help you make those decisions and those discussions in those different areas, as well as other service needs that people have mentioned too. And so I've talked to the mayor about this. I think she's supportive of, at least on a quarterly basis, of giving you a lot of detailed information about our revenues and the changes that are occurring and our projections and where we think we're going with that. So I think that'll be helpful.
Thank you, Ron. I think that we do need to keep a good eye on our spending and our revenues, but we also should keep in mind that Urbana is a bit unique in that most governments have debt and we do not. So it does require very careful management, and we do have an emphasis on economic development. That's why we have Tom Carino and our staff at Community Development, that we're trying to add retail and commercial as well as residential. And so far, it's worked pretty well, so we have to keep up the hard effort. Okay, Heather.
On the note of economic development, I think it's really important. I mean, I know that's one of our top 10 goals as a council, and you know that's my number one goal as far as I sit here on the council. I'm thrilled we have Tom here. I also think it's our job as council members to listen to our constituents and hear what they want. And let's bring those back to Tom and see how we can, you know, get more businesses in the city of Urbana. I grew up where I could shop at Lincoln Square. I'd love to be able to take my kids to a mall in Urbana versus driving across to Champaign. So let's, as city council members, kick in gear and listen to our constituents so we can have a thriving community here in Urbana.
Anyone else? Okay, would the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Barnes?
Yes.
Mr. Bowersox?
Yes.
Ms. Shenoweth?
Yes.
Mr. Lewis?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Smythe?
Yes.
Ms. Stevenson?
Yes.
That motion carries. Moving on, reappointments by the mayor. For Community Development Commission, I'm recommending Chris Diana for a term to expire June 30th, 2010. That's for Community Development Commission. Michael McCulley for the Development Review Board. That's also expiring June 30th, 2010. And on the Plan Commission, Michael Pollack and Lou Hopkins for terms, again, expiring June 30th, 2010. And finally, for Boneyard Creek Commissioner, Clark Bullard, again, a term to expire June 30th, 2010. All these people are already on these commissions and doing a fine job, so I would recommend their approval, but we need a motion and a second.
Second?
Okay, motion by Mr. Smythe, seconded by Ms. Stevenson. All those...
Mayor?
Yes.
I just wanted to thank these individuals. They do a lot of work. A lot of the stuff, a lot of the business of the city, interactions with the public occur at these commission and review board levels, and the citizens that involve deserve our thanks.
We do thank them, and they also seem to enjoy the work because they always apply for reappointment. So I think it's a two-way street here, and they really do contribute a tremendous amount to the city. We're very fortunate to have a very active citizenry in Urbana. So all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay, thank you very much. There being no further business, this meeting is adjourned.